your mind is a board, and there are different board of directors. There's fear, there's anxiety, there's optimism. Then you ask yourself in your board, who's got decision-making rights? The turning point for me was having someone tell me what I needed to hear versus what I wanted to hear. It was the most painful feedback you can get, especially when you think so much of yourself at that point in time, right?
It sliced through your ego.
It sliced through my heart, my ego, every vein in my body. Eventually, I asked myself this question. Is this who you want to be?
All right, Haresh, I'm glad we're finally getting the chance to do this.
Thank you for being so patient.
It's been a while in the making. How have you been recently?
I've been well. I've been traveling a lot. So that's why it took a while for us to kind of coordinate dates and calendars and stuff like that. But it's been good. I've been well.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I want to start the conversation by perhaps taking a trip down memory lane. I don't know how far back you want to go, but I know that you started out your career as a flight steward.
That's right.
So I'm just curious to know what prompted you going in that direction to begin with, and kind of what life was like in early childhood days, and what shaped your path going forward.
I may have served your dad coffee or tea on one of his flights on Singapore Airlines, Iman.
Okay.
Not you. You're a bit young.
Yeah, I'm a bit young.
Look, I became a flight steward because I didn't know what to do with my life.
Yeah.
I was in college. My dream was to play professional football. And then I was called up to train with the National Under-23, and I busted my knees. That's why I tore my ACL, and that was the start of the end for me. And very quickly realized that there's nothing I can do any further from soccer. So I ended up leaving the army, but I didn't know what to do with my life. So I decided to just continue playing more sport, which I love. And then I said, okay, Singapore Airlines came about. I've met a few friends. They said, why don't you try? I did. And I was like, wow, this is fantastic. I get to play sport. Plus, I get to travel the world. It doesn't get any better than that. Indeed, so that's what I did. Yeah. That's how I ended up with Singapore Airlines. I did that for about 15 months, but very quickly realized that wasn't the kind of life I wanted to lead. You are on the beck and call of the company, right? If you have to go, you have to go. There's no negotiation. Can I go later? Can I not go? Can I choose my trips? Nothing like that can happen, right?
Yeah.
So you have no flexibility. So I ended up doing that for 15 months, but very quickly realized that's not what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And I then decided that I wanted to leave. I closed that door. I took about a 70% pay cut. I was young, foolish, no responsibilities, no family per se, in the sense that wife or kids and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I started my own business. That proved to be really interesting because I had an idea. Someone was ready to fund it. And I decided, okay, I'll go do this. And it puts me grounded in Singapore, and I didn't have to go travel like the way I was traveling.
Yeah.
And that worked out well, and I did that for about a year before I got a call from someone, and he said, why don't you come and, join my company. It's a big retail chain in Singapore, very popular in those days. And why did you come and be the head of buying, and at some point go run the place? And I did that. I did that for a couple of years, and we did well. And sadly, the family had there was a family fight, and the business collapsed.
Yeah.
And we had to wind down the business, which was, very, very hard when you're at 25, 26, and you're telling all your staff that they have no work. And they were dependent on the year-end bonuses and year-end salaries to pay for school fees and books and stuff like that. So it was a very tough period, but it was a growing up period for me, and made me realize at a very young age, nothing is permanent. You can't take what you have for granted.
Yeah.
And but the learnings were massive, and that period gave me the ability to experiment, and together with my bosses, we were able to build a business model that drove the convergence of IT and consumer electronics retailing, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then we started that. It was a right thing to do, but probably we were a little early ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And then, but I took those learnings and I ended up joining a distribution company and implemented it there, and it took off, And so I did IT distribution for about a year plus. And then I got a call from Microsoft that said, hey, come join us. And I said, okay,
Amazing.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So I joined Microsoft in 97. okay, as a product manager for the
Yeah.
games business, which quite frankly was a tiny business, insignificant, inconsequential,
Yeah.
all right, compared to what it is now.
Yeah.
But my claim to fame in the games business, if you're a gamer, was the launch of Age of Empires. So I launched Age of Empires in Singapore, which was
Wow.
my claim to fame, and I'm not a gamer, by the way,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
know how big it was.
Yeah.
And that started my career at Microsoft. But truth be told, I don't come from a traditional background. You finish your A-levels, you go and get a degree, and then you go into a certain specific function. So I didn't have a degree. I was very grateful because Microsoft saw me from what I was capable and able to do versus my paperwork, my qualifications. And after 6 months in the job, I struggled, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And because, there were so many smart people, very experienced, very well educated, computer science backgrounds, ex-HP, IBMs, all really, really smart people.
Was it imposter syndrome that you had, or?
So what ended up happening, it could be a little bit of, but what ended up happening was, if this was a problem, they would come it from this angle and I would come from this angle.
Yeah.
So my background was more strategy, marketing, business. So I would clash. And when you're young and foolish, you think you're right and they're wrong, right? You just think you know better and, they don't know anything, right? So 6 months in, I ended up, I kept clashing. I called up my headhunter in tears and I said, I don't know what kind of a place did you get me into. I said, get me out of here. And she said, okay, I'll call you back. And I waited 19 years for the call. It never came. And it was probably the best call I never got, because I learned so much after that. But the turning point for me was having someone tell me what I needed to hear versus what I wanted to hear. And she was my senior, and she had the courage to actually tell me what I needed to hear. It was the most painful feedback you can get, especially when you think so much of yourself at that point in time, right?
It sliced through your ego. Huh?
Oh, it sliced through my heart, my ego, every vein in my body, I kind of buried myself for 2 days. I didn't want to talk
I'm
to
sure you
anybody
did, yeah.
in tears and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then there was this 48 hours, there was this thought that went through my head that eventually I asked myself this question. Is this who you want to be? Or if this is how you're getting perceived, is this who you want to be? And the answer for me was no. So then the question is, what do you want to do about it?
Yeah.
And that's where I had a flick of a switch and saying, okay, look, this is not who I want to be or who I want to be perceived as. And so I need to turn around and change because no one else is going to change. And that was the start of a very different trajectory for me in the company. And I ended up building a 19-year career in the company and working my way up.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey that you've had, pretty colorful, if I may add.
Pretty fortunate as well.
Very fortunate as well.
Yeah, very grateful. Yeah, very
absolutely.
lucky.
Which brings me to, speaking of, pondering over who you want to be, you've written a book called Growth by Choice,
That's right.
Making the Space for a Better You. I'm curious to know what space looked like in your life at the start of your journey and what space looks like now.
I don't think I knew at that point in time because I didn't have anyone coaching me or telling me, saying, hey, look, you got to think about this. And when I think about it in hindsight, I think space for me at that point in time was doing what I love and creating the time and intentionality of my time towards doing what I love. And that was playing football.
Yeah.
That was sport. That was absolute my first love. I would go to extreme ends just to play in the game, and spend time there. When people were out on a Saturday night, I was training, with my clubs and so on and so forth. So for me, I think at that point in time, that was my space to do what I love. Did I know I was creating space for myself? I didn't know at that point in time, to be honest with you. But I think, more and more now, being intentional and understanding what you need to kind of refill your cup for you to find your own form of happiness, so that it fills your cup and it lights you up is going to be key. And for me now, finding space for myself is a variety of different things on any given day.
Yeah.
It starts with creating space for myself in the mornings before I start work. So like if I have a call at 8, some people will wake up at 7 or 7:15 and jump into a shower and then go on a call.
Yeah.
I can't do that, right? I'd wake up a little earlier and then I will get ready and then I will sit down, have my morning, whatever, my biscuit or my coffee or whatever it is. And then I will read, I will scroll through my emails for the day. I will go read a few things just to kind of get my mind, my body to slowly wake up and kind of get into the zone, and then I'll jump on a call.
Do you have like a reflective practice that you indulge in the morning, like meditation or journaling?
I don't journal, but the irony of it is when I wrote Growth by Choice, it was probably the most cathartic 2 years I've had writing Growth by Choice. Right?
Yeah.
So in some sense, this was my journal at that point in time.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But I do meditate. And sometimes just being quiet, being on my own, I'm an introvert. So for me, the ability to spend time with myself so that I can recharge, I can reconnect, I can reflect on what happens through the day, for me is very important. And I try to do that either in the morning, to just turn around and take my time. There's a place I go to sometimes meditate, especially on the weekends when I'm in town, because I travel quite a fair bit on the weekdays. And then at the end of the day, sometimes, it's just putting your feet up with a glass of wine and just reflecting on what went on and what you'd like to do differently or do better.
Yeah.
It works differently for every individual.
Yeah.
People say I'm very structured, but I feel like I have a method to my madness, but it's not as structured as I'd like, but it works for me. So I kind of find pockets of spaces, even during the course of the day, to be able to reflect on conversations that I've had. Or in between meetings, to be able to turn around and just, create a little bit of space that allows me to think.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I just want to touch again on this sentence, making space for the better you. And maybe better you can be paraphrased, correct me if I'm wrong, as like the better version of oneself.
Absolutely.
My question is a two-pronged one on that front. What is the better version of yourself? Because there's multiple versions that you can aspire to. That's point number one. Point number two is, how can you aspire to become a better version of yourself when you don't know yourself yet? Who are you to begin with?
And that's a brilliant point. And we were discussing this earlier on, right? So the starting point of where magic can start to happen is having awareness. And it's not just self-awareness, it's also awareness of everything around you and what's happening around you. In this whole concept of leadership, you cannot lead others if you don't know how to lead yourself. So the starting point is, do you know how to lead yourself?
Correct.
Right? If you don't know how to
parent yourself?
Can you parent yourself? Can you lead yourself? Because if you can't, then how do you turn around and lead a large team and a whole bunch, an organization or whatever it is? So, but I think this whole concept of self-awareness is not something we pay enough attention to. More often than not, I feel like it's a by the way for many people because we live in a very busy world. We're all busy. We're on a treadmill. You've got responsibilities as a father, mother, husband, wife, parent, whatever it is, right? So you don't take the time to actually create that space. When you turn around and talk about better version of you, look, we all have multiple personas. We have a persona of a professional, as a son, as a father, as a friend, as colleagues. So there are multiple versions of us out there. But our value systems tie us
together. Yeah.
Right? All our personalities, right? Whatever roles we play.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But when you think about a better version of yourself, in the context of work, what does a better version of yourself look like? In the context of your marriage, what does a better version of yourself look like? In the context of your relationship with your child, what does a better version of yourself look like? So I think you need to...
Is that how you compartmentalize it?
I do, to some extent.
That sounds like a lot of work, right?
Well, it comes naturally, right?
Fair enough.
Again, you got the value systems, right?
Yeah.
That you kind of binds you. So a simple example would be, how do you listen more and talk less?
That's a good one.
Okay. Does that apply with your kids where, they tell you that, I don't want you to give me advice, as my kids sometimes tell me, I just want you to listen to me.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing, translate that into the work context.
Yeah.
Right? In the work context, you want to be able to turn around and ensure that you're listening to your teams, that they feel heard because they have ideas. They can give you better answers to solutions or to solving certain problems versus you think you're the boss and you know everything and said, let me tell you, I used to do this many years ago. It didn't work. I used to do that and it worked.
You know what this reminds me of? Jeff Bezos has a really interesting way of tackling meetings. So he typically allows the junior members of the team to speak first during, let's say, a presentation, because he knows that if the seniors speak first and the juniors come last, they'll be reticent. They won't want to share their ideas for fear of the ideas being shot down or what
Correct.
have you. So I think that's like a really good practice that, people could take a leaf out of his book.
100%, but it also applies to the culture.
Yeah.
You got to have the right culture within the organization that facilitates something like that. Because in some organizations and in some cultures and in some countries and in some regions like Asia, if you're a junior and you're in a hierarchical organization, you probably won't want to speak up before your seniors do, right? You don't want to challenge your seniors in public in front of everyone. So it really depends on the culture of the organization, right? That plays a super key part with regards to how ideas like that can flourish.
Yeah. Fear also plays a big part
100%.
in a team's culture. You talk a lot about overcoming fear and indecision, even in the book.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know whether you believe emotional well-being is foundational to making good decisions,
Absolutely.
both in the workplace and at home.
Absolutely. I think there's no doubt about that. The reason I talk a lot about fear is because I had to deal with very significant issues with fear. So at a young age of about 7, primary 1, going to exams.
Yes, I read that in the book.
And the night before, I had temporary paralysis.
I wasn't great with exams either, by the way.
I was like massive anxiety.
Yeah.
I didn't want to disappoint my parents. And I couldn't move.
Yeah.
I couldn't move. And so obviously my parents were worried. And I missed my exams that day. Lucky for me, those days you pass or fail, you still go to the next level.
Yeah.
So, I didn't sit for my exams, and we went for a bunch of medical tests and realized at the end there was nothing physically wrong with me. I'm going to admit this now. Actually saw a psychiatrist for a while just to unpack what was going on.
Yeah.
And they later realized that I had so much fear, and that's what held me back. That's what stopped me from moving, paralyzed me. Right? So at a very young age, I learned a lot about fear, what fear can do.
Yeah.
But at a very young age, I also learned that I had to fight fear to find courage, because that's the only way for me to move forward. Right? And then over a period of time, and after writing Growth by Choice and having conversations with global audiences, which is what I loved about what I did, was the ability to go speak to different audiences. You start to realize wherever you come from, whatever your culture, whatever your upbringing, we all have fears. The question is, are we ready, and do we have the courage to admit we have a fear? All right? And then how do we confront that fear? And then how do we use that fear in a positive way versus in the way that it applied to me when I was a kid, and it stopped me from moving forward.
Yeah.
So finding fear to find courage, and is something for me that I live with on a day-to-day basis, whether I go on your radio show and I speak with you, or I go and do public speaking, for example, or when I did my first TED Talk, for example. All of that, there was a lot of fear in there.
Yeah.
But how do you fight it? And find courage.
Yeah. I heard this quote, and I don't know how much you agree with it, but it goes something along the lines of, fear is like a mirage. The closer you get to it, the more you begin to realize it was an illusion to begin with.
Correct.
An illusion of the mind, right?
100%.
Which is not kind of devaluing the fear that people have over, legitimate things in their life, right? But a lot of it is sort of compounded and created in the mind. Right?
Yeah. And so in the last couple of years, for me, as you grow up, you become, hopefully a little wiser, a little bit more aware. One thing that's very clear for me, this concept of the mind is super powerful.
Yeah.
All right. If you look at Darwin, you look at Newton, those days, there was no computers. They just used their minds to invent stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So the mind is an incredibly powerful thing. Right. And going to get more powerful when you augment it with AI and technology and so on and so forth. Right. But when you look at this whole concept of fear, I realized eventually you cannot run away from that feeling. Fear is a feeling. So fear will have a role in your board of directors. So your mind is a board. And there are different board of directors. There's fear, there's anxiety, there's optimism. Then you ask yourself in your board, who's got decision-making rights?
Yes.
And fear is a board member, 0 decision-making rights. And the moment that sank in for me, then, it started to, but it requires a lot of effort. Then it started to turn around and shift the way I think, shift the way I confront decisions, shift the way I think about how I make certain decisions, how I tackle opportunities, how I face challenges.
Yeah.
It doesn't have decision-making rights. It's got a seat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm acknowledging the fear.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to allow it to make decisions for me.
Yeah. I actually like the way you've described them as board members or like committee members.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes very helpful to visualize these things to help you get through them. One way to deal with fear is by taking action. Mm-hmm. And you have a very powerful concept in your book called the return on inaction, which is a different kind of ROI that people in the corporate world are used to hearing.
Correct.
Not return on investment, but return on inaction.
Correct.
Can you dive into what you mean by that with some examples?
Whenever we think about opportunities that come in our life, right? So for me, there are three things, right? There's moments, choices, and awareness.
Okay.
Right? Imagine three concentric circles. They overlap. In the middle is where magic happens.
Yes.
Okay? So when you look at the whole concept of the return of inaction, most of the time we all focus on the return of action. All right? Okay, so action is invest, right? So if I invest, what do I get? Oh, I'm not getting a good ROI. Let's not do it. All right? Oh, if I and another form of investment on a personal basis is I've got a great job opportunity, right? Do I take it? Do I not? If I take it, what if I fail? Oh no, better stay in my safe space. These are all examples of us evaluating these scenarios from the perspective of what's the return I will get on the action I take. But we don't sit down and take a step back and say, what if I don't do it? What is the cost or the return of inaction? So for example, you turn around and say, oh, my ROI on this particular investment is going to be 2. It should be 10. But what if you don't do it? If you don't take the 2, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And there are many companies out there like Kodak and like Nokia and so on and so forth. Because of the cost of inaction, you know where they are now. And there are many other examples there. Now take the concept of opportunity. So I had a recent friend who I mentor. And she came up to me and she says, I want to move from the current role I'm at into another role. I want to expand my horizons and so on and so forth. I said, great. And I said, then she said, I got a regional role recently. I got offered a regional role. I said, really? Yeah. Okay, great. And as I got to know her, and when she told me she got a regional role, I said, why didn't you take it? She says, no, I got 2 young kids. They're growing up. I think I need to be around them more. If not, this is going to require a lot of travel. So I said, how do you know it's going to require a lot of travel? It requires some travel, but how do you know you can't balance it? Because our company is actually a good company and they're very flexible, all right? No one's going to force you to do things that, that's going to compromise your family time and stuff like that. So I said, was it really your kids or was it something else? And then we unpacked it and we realized it was not just the kids. It was fear.
Yeah.
Because the fear of taking a bigger job, bigger responsibilities, bigger exposure. So, in that instance, right, what is the cost or the return of her inaction? So her inaction was actually driven by fear, but it was masked by this thing about, I've got young kids. So more and more, in a world that's disrupting, that's changing, you can look at the world around you and say, oh my God, there's so much disruption, there's so much chaos, which there is. But in disruption and chaos is where opportunities start to emerge. So the question now is, are you looking for the opportunities or are you getting caught up and taken in by the fear of the chaos and the change? And that's the shift if people start to make. You will then start to turn around and look at the return of investment very differently. So this whole concept of inaction, where people choose not to make a decision, that is an action.
Yeah.
Right? Ignorance is not, in this instance, not bliss. Right? You can't blame ignorance and say, okay, I'll save it for later, because disruption is coming and it's coming in massive ways. So if you choose not to do anything, if you choose to stay in your comfort zone, guess what? That's a choice you're making.
Yeah.
And that's a choice that says, I don't want to do anything. Great. So the choice of not wanting to do anything is X. And the choice of doing something is Y. You got to weigh that out.
Yeah.
But you got to weigh both and not one.
Yeah.
And more often than not, we weigh one of the choices and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just curious to know whether this concept is something that you apply in the workplace as well, because it's a different way of looking at a particular problem in one's life. And I'm wondering, as a regional tech leader, you lead a lot of people, you travel a lot, you meet people of a similar ilk around the world. Is that the kind of approach you take, generally speaking, in the workplace? And how has that sort of like benefited your working relationships with people?
I work with a lot of smart people.
Yeah.
And they are a lot smarter than I am, for sure. And when you're working with smart people, the intent of hiring people smarter than you is so that you can empower them, you can give them the guardrails, and then you can let them loose, right?
Yeah.
For them to go and do amazing stuff because you know they're capable of doing it, right? And then you want to be the conductor that connects the dots across a matrix organization to be able to scale.
Yeah.
Right. And in my head, 1 + 1 should be equal to 11 in the context of business, right? The cost of inaction is more about helping people think about the choices they're making, right? Versus telling them what they should do. So it's how you influence someone versus telling them what they need to turn around and do. So when in my style of leadership, when I think about the cost of inaction, it's a way for helping my teams think about the decisions that they're making and the choices that they're not making, right? More often than not, it's easy in a busy world, and when there's a lot of pressure to take the easy route into what choices you should do. And some of the choices could be, I don't want to do anything right now, I'll keep it as it is. But the idea of exploring the cost of inaction is to help people think in a very different way. So broaden the horizons, broaden the perspective, do a bit of lateral thinking with regards to how we can tackle different opportunities that are emerging, how we can tackle the challenges that are in front of us. So that's how I think about the cost of inaction and the question around that in terms of the way I influence, in terms of the way I kind of try and evolve the way people think and challenge the way people think in that regard.
Touching on challenge and disruption, what is the single biggest threat, if we can call it that we face external to us as human beings? AI you've mentioned, yes, but what is the threat of AI? Is it that we are not taking the right approach to how we can integrate AI into the workflow? Is it that we are worried that it may make us look inferior? I mean, what is the real challenge? Because you're in the tech space, and I'm curious to know from an outsider looking in, what people are really thinking.
I've been talking about how disruption is happening, for a while now, and it's going to accelerate. And we're seeing it come from all corners, right? You've got geopolitics, you've got technology, you've got organizational change, and so on and so forth. So this whole concept of change and disruption and the notion around that is going to continue. Where it's going to come from, how it's going to come from, to what extent, what degree, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But I do know there's a whole bunch of stuff ahead of us, right? Technology-led disruption will continue. It's not going to stop. We're thinking about AI now. I'm a big believer of augmentation, AI, and how it augments human ingenuity. And I think that's going to continue to be a big theme going forward. Yeah. Where people who know how to use AI will replace people who don't. So I do think that's going to be a big theme forward. So I think how we think about learning our new skill sets, how we think about trying new things. And then you start to apply things like the cost of inaction. What if I don't do anything now? What if I don't upgrade my skills now? What will happen? Yeah. Right? So that's where I start to think about intentionality. And that's where I wrote Growth by Choice, because the whole premise was this. If you know the world is changing and there's enough literature out there to tell you that the world is changing, right? Read Michio Kaku, read Malcolm Gladwell, read Adam Grant, or whoever you want to read all you want, right? If you know the world is changing, then why are you not proactively disrupting yourself on your terms so that you can thrive in a world of change versus waiting and hoping to survive? So why are we not proactively owning our own disruption? And that was the basis of the book. And that's where I explored concepts of fear and so on and so forth. Yep. So I think going forward in this world, the biggest enemy or issue is ourselves. It's not even external. Yes. Because I think with every disruption, there'll be new opportunities that will emerge. But if you're not willing to give up or let go of who you were, let go of what you've learned, take on new learnings, try new things, take a bit of risk in the process, then how will you ever learn how to dance in the rain? You will always take shade in the rain, and we can't afford it right now because the amount of change and volatility will continue. And it will come from all facets of life, in my opinion, as we've seen in recent times.
I'm curious to know about your approach to building a culture, again, coming back to this point of people growing intentionally, because that's what you want, but without them burning out in the process. Can you touch a little bit on that?
For me, when building teams and building organizations, the whole investment in culture needs to be a big priority. Culture, people, right? I think you can build strategy, you can invest in resources and so on and so forth. But if you don't have the right culture and the right people, the ability for organizations to scale, to thrive, to succeed, to build sustainable success, I think at some point, is going to be very, very hard to do. So building culture is a multi-year journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It requires consistency. It requires clarity, persistence, symbols. It requires change. It requires accountability, towards this culture. So when you think about this whole thing about helping people thrive in such a culture, it's how you encourage, it's how you reward, it's how you incent. It's how you showcase people who take risks, who are willing to innovate, who are willing to collaborate. Because in a matrix environment, collaboration becomes key. So how do you celebrate people who actually collaborate? How do you celebrate people who actually innovate? How do you celebrate people who actually take risks and fail? How do you do that? How do you create space in the form of funds that you could say, if you've got a random idea and you think it can impact the business, build a case for it and we'll fund it. All right. So you're trying to build flexibility and entrepreneurship within a corporate environment. That doesn't happen overnight, right? That happens over a period of time. And you want a culture to facilitate that so that people know, if I try this, I fail, I'm not going to get penalized by this. And we've done that over a period of time, that we have very little to no fear. And I would say little fear because fear is always going to be there. You can't 100% eradicate it. Where people are willing to challenge the status quo, where people are willing to take risks, where people are willing to call others out with regards to what we can do better and do it in a way that is open, that's honest, that's constructive, right? And from a company standpoint, won a lot of awards as a company that reflect, the culture that we have. But more importantly, for me, it's allowed me to build teams that have rallied even in times of difficulty to drive success. But if you don't have the right people and you don't have the right people who are motivated, you're not going to get 110%. And the 110% should come willingly and not because there's fear. Because when it comes out of fear, that's where burnout starts to happen, right? Where people are working out of fear. People need to come to work really enthused, really energetic, really, inspired to want to come and do more. That's the focus for me, right? And at the same time, making sure that, people taking breaks and celebrating successes are a core part of what you do. It's not just about work and no play.
So would you say that a culture-first approach is a key ingredient to how you would define success in the workplace? Because I'm curious to know, from the time that you started out in your career to now, how has the word success evolved? Because it's kind of a corporate word that's just been bandied about, and it takes on different meanings. So what does it mean to you?
I think I wouldn't say a culture first is what defines success. I'd say it enables it.
Sure.
If you don't have the right culture and the right people, it's going to be very, very hard for any organization to drive sustainable success. And for me, at the end of the day, success has got many facets. There's a personal definition, Haresh's definition of success for himself. And then there's success for the team and the organization. The organization success is very clear. The metrics are outlined. Everyone knows. The team's success is part of it is the organizations, all your revenue metrics and all the other metrics. But within the team success, it's also about us. Who are we? What is our brand? How are we perceived? And the elements of that right, that gets defined as well within the context of a team. And then there's my success. And my success as a leader, for me, I define my success is in the way of how do I enable the success of others. So when I lead through teams, it's not about me. It's about how do I enable their success. And if they succeed, then for me, at the end of the day, that's my definition of my success. But as a professional, obviously as a leader of a business for the region, for a globally listed company, I have my core metrics from a business standpoint that defines my success in a professional context. But in a very personal context for me, success is really about how I help other people become successful.
Yeah. On that note, I'm curious to know, what is one choice you've made recently that reflects the better you that you're still becoming? Because it's an ongoing process.
It is an ongoing process, yeah. I think learning to let go is something that over the years I've been working on, to let go of what holds me back, to let go of the things I've learned so that I can learn new things and become better at what I do. Because, when you spend 19 years in one company, you learn a lot of things, right? And you have a certain way of working. But when you go to another company, you got to let go a little bit of that in order for you to adapt to a new culture, a new way of working. The ability to let go is hard, and easier for some people, harder for some people because of our mental makeup, our mental models are different. So for me, the learning to let go, learning to say no, learning to prioritize. These are some examples of choices that I'm making more and more now, more intentionally than I ever have before, so that I can create space for myself, so that I can then learn how I can actually thrive in a world of constant change.
So when you say learning to say no, how do you sort of draw boundaries for yourself? And how does that play out?
Yeah, it's very hard for me personally because I'm more often not say yes. I get a lot of people requesting time with me. I get a lot of people internally, externally. More often than not, I say yes. I'm learning, now as well as a leader to say no. But say no respectfully, say no nicely, not say no in a way that people think, oh, you're an arrogant person and, you think you're a big shot. That's not the intention, right? So I am learning how to draw boundaries. And obviously, in life, we go through different scenarios. Yeah. So I had a health scenario recently. That's forced me now to turn around and really learn how to draw boundaries and saying, this is a priority for you. You can't keep taking on more and saying yes to everything because, of what you're going to be, the price you're going to be paying. And given what I went through recently, so now I'm learning now how to say no and drawing boundaries for myself, so that I can manage the number of hours I work a day.
So how do you decide who to say no to and who to say yes to in a way that doesn't hurt someone else and doesn't hurt yourself?
I know. And I'd say I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach. Yeah. Okay? I genuinely don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach. I think for me, when I turn around and I get a lot of people asking me, okay, in a professional context, can you mentor me? I want you to be my mentor. I'm an executive coach. I have people reaching out to me and saying, hey, can you be my coach? And then I teach, all right? So I've got my workplace stuff and I've got stuff that I do outside. And then I've got my board duties, for where I sit. And in all of these instances, I meet with smart people, good people, and I want to contribute. I want to help. I want to partner. And I think now I've come to a point whereby I want to do it, but I really can't. And I start by now asking, if you want me to be your mentor, the question is why? What do you want to achieve? Right? I'm starting to qualify things a little bit more. Yes. If you want to catch up, why do you want to catch up? So I start to turn around and question that. And more often than not, I end up saying, hey, look, I probably will not be the best person to help you here. In the past, I didn't qualify. And then I'd say I introduce you to someone else. In some instances, you want to catch up for X reason. I say, look, 15 minutes is enough. We'll do a Zoom call, for example. You don't need to turn around and meet me for coffee for half an hour and so on and so forth. It could be a quick chat, for example. And then in some instances, look, I don't think I'll be able to turn around and spare time, and I'm being really honest with you. Yeah. But I would point you to these resources for you to think about how you can answer those questions. You can read here. So I'm starting to be more intentional, but I don't want to be rude to anybody, right? But I'm starting to be more intentional with regards to where I spend time. Even from a coaching standpoint, I will try to understand what they want and why they think I'm the right person. And then I will decide, if I am or I'm not. So I think everyone's different, but I can tell you, helping others fills my cup.
Yeah.
So if it fills my cup, I have a tendency of then over-rotating towards it. But given my recent situation with my health, I had to turn around and rebalance my time and be a little bit more selfish with my time, so to speak, so that I can create that space for myself in the process.
And you also can't help someone effectively if your own energy stocks are depleted. Right?
100%. 100%.
Right? You talked about executive coaching. What kind of people come to you, and what kind of problems do they come to you with?
I get a lot of senior leaders. And these are people who are in influential roles, got big jobs, big titles, who are looking for, I would say, a confidant to help them, right? Some of them are new to these senior roles and they don't know how to maneuver. Some of them get into the senior roles, have had many years of experience, and then suddenly they get a new challenge and they don't know how to rise to that challenge, so they need help. Some of them just need an outlet to speak to because they are in a senior role. They cannot turn around and show their vulnerabilities outside, or they think they can't. So they need a confidant to speak to guide, someone to bounce things off. So it really depends. So they come with a variety of different challenges, from performance, how do I improve my performance, to how I navigate change, to how do I think about culture, to how I deal with certain specific problems in the organization. So it's a variety. There's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Which is exciting because I learned so much in the process. Yeah. So for me, I have one person who has got huge ambitions, but
no framework,
and doesn't want to acknowledge what he actually lacks and is holding him back, but he's got a huge ambition. So how do you start to turn around and help people rebalance this and come to a point whereby they are holding themselves back? You can help unlock that so that they can move ahead. So there are a variety of different things, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, are any of these people, you think, too obsessed with a career-driven life? As in, do they struggle to find balance? Because we're talking about wellness and well-being, right? Is that like a big issue that you see presented to you?
100%. 100%. I always say we live in a world where there's infinite amounts of information, knowledge, data.
But finite time
and attention.
Yeah.
Right? So the sooner we come to understand that, the sooner we start to think about, okay, I have finite time and attention. I love myself. I want to be happy and healthy. But I got all this. What do I do and how do I do it? Right? So walking through those conversations with people is an interesting experiment to turn around and do. I teach leadership in some places here in Singapore, and it's interesting because I always put up a slide, and when I put up one slide, it's a picture, and I start to narrate that picture in my terms.
Okay.
And then when I narrate that picture in my terms, I said, this is a popular figure. What do you think he's doing? He's clearly bombarded by a lot of journalists. There's a lot of attention on him. He gets stressed. So sometimes when you're a popular figure, you get stressed. What do? You might do something you shouldn't be doing, And then I pause. So I said, what do you do? And straight away, everyone's minds, right, got hooked on to what I said. And then they say, oh, he must be showing the middle finger, or he must be doing something wrong, and so on and so forth. Then I show the next slide. He wasn't showing the middle finger. He was showing something else, and the context was something else.
Yeah.
But because everyone heard what I was saying, and they got drawn in, and they basically started to believe what I was saying, and they all had this own perception of what the person was actually doing. So I was just trying to narrate at that point in time how we all get influenced by headlines, how we all get influenced by social media. So the sooner we understand how we're getting influenced, how our mind's working, the better our ability to manage that noise, right? So for me, one of the things I do, for example, is there's a lot of, scrolling people do.
Yes. Doom scrolling.
Doom scrolling, they call it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of headlines people read. right? The Economist will pop up headlines, CNN will pop up headlines, and based on the headlines, boom, they form narratives in their head. Oh, this person is being such a bad person, and so on and so forth. But they don't read to understand the context of what was going on.
Yep.
Right? And we all know why people have this kind of provocative headlines. So I've come to terms now to say, hey, look, I will see the headlines, but I'm not going to go jump into a narrative headlines. I have a few sources that I go to, my go-to sources that I trust. And that's it. So I don't need to know everything, but I know where to go if I need to find something. So I'm in control versus I'm being influenced. Okay? It's not a perfect model. Obviously, we all get influenced. But I know for a fact now, one, I don't need to be on top of everything. And two, when I want to read and I want to understand what's happening around the world, I know which are my go-to sources and I go there and that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go through entire social media and try to know everything about everything. And that helps reduce the chatter in my head. That helps me control the amount of bombardment I get with the amount of information, amount of data that comes transpired to me. So for me, the information, the data should work for me, not I work for them. All right. In some instances, I think people get completely caught up.
Yeah.
So much so that I think they just lose control of what they should be believing and what they shouldn't. So
I mean, you outsource your agency to technology, right? If
correct.
You will. Yeah.
You know, but this whole thing about what is your information architecture for the individual? You know, in tech, you got your information architectures, right? Your systems and the way you organize your systems, you capture data, synthesize data, and all that stuff. So same thing for the human being, right? So you as a human being, what is your information architecture? How do you receive information? Where you receive information? How you process information? You got to be cognizant of that.
And the people you surround yourself with as well.
And the people you surround
right?
yourself with
Right.
as well. Correct.
Yeah.
So that's going to be super important so that you start to turn around and believe in a way that is more fact-based than it is based on hearsay.
Yes.
It is based on speculation. You know, because there's so much out there. Imad, what do you believe? What do you not believe? Right? And why do you need to know everything? So when someone asks me, how do you keep up with everything? I say, I don't. The simple thing, the simple truth is I don't.
Yeah.
But do I read? I do, to get perspective, to broaden my perspective. But I know where I go for credible information. But I also know when I do it because I have finite time. I have finite time and I have finite attention. And when I'm tired, I can't. And when I've got time, I'm going to craft that time. I'm going to use that time for what I want to use it for. But with your finite time, you have to learn to take control of that and be deliberate. Otherwise, you're just going to get swept away by the wave of information that's out there. And you're going to get lost. There's so much chatter. The world is bad. You know, there's so much chaos. Oh my God, what's happening here? There's war. And then you get into the spiral. So you have to turn around and recognize that you have finite time. And as a result, when you have finite time and attention, how do you spend that time? What choices do you want to make for yourself in terms of where you go for information, where you go for perspectives, for opinions, and so on and so forth?
Yeah. It's a really good point. Is there a non-negotiable daily habit that you engage in to keep your mind sharp?
A non-negotiable daily habit, I think at some point it becomes second nature.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I think exercise is something important for me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't do it daily, but a couple of times a week for sure.
Are you the type of person who exercises whilst listening to a podcast?
Guilty.
Or is that the time?
Guilty as charged. Yep.
Because I've started actually taking walks without listening to anything.
Okay.
And I find it very freeing.
Yeah.
In fact, more liberating than I initially thought it would be.
So,
because there's this fear of like, I'm not productive enough.
Yeah.
You know, I'm on a walk. I need to be doing something.
So I have that. So I'm dealing with that right now.
Right.
Life, like literally dealing with that right now. Right. Like if I'm walking, you know, do I get on a podcast or should I listen to music? But if I listen to music, then you know maybe a podcast is more informative. You know, maybe I should get onto a podcast, for example. You know, so I have these conversations that go on. So for me, it depends on my mood. But I tried once walking. Actually, I didn't try it because my AirPods had no more battery in it.
Oh, they were busted.
They were busted, so I had no choice but to not listen to anything. And it was nice. You know, it was really, really nice. You know.
Final question. What advice would you give to someone listening today who feels stuck, whether it's on a professional basis or a personal basis, but wants to make space for change?
There's so much on social media advising people. There is a ton. People telling you, you don't let a job or a title define you. People telling you, go read certain books, take certain training. There's all sorts of things happening out there. The first step I'd say is change will happen. And if you're going through that, recognize that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Right? Don't beat yourself up and it's about you. You're special, but sometimes you're not that special. It's happening to all of us, you know? So the first thing I'd say is, take the time to reflect, take the time to deal with your emotions because it's natural, whatever emotions you go through. Secondly, I'd say is pick yourself up quick. Okay? Pick yourself up quick. And picking yourself up quick doesn't mean you don't acknowledge what happened. You acknowledge what happened. But you then decide you ask yourself the question, what do you want to do about it? What did you learn from that experience and what do you want to do about it?
Return on inaction.
Return on inaction, right? Ask yourself, what do you want to do about it? Yeah. So do you want to do something about it or do you not want to do something about it? And it's easy to turn around and say, obviously they want to do something about it. Why would you turn around and ask that question? But asking the question is a contract that you are making with yourself. All right? You're not assuming you want to do. You're asking yourself, say, yes, I want to do something about it. Great. Then what do you want to do about it? Okay, I'm going to start looking for X roles. And as I look for X roles, I'm going to start learning new skills. I'm going to sign up for my courses. I'm going to go and reach out to a few people to ask for advice. I'm going to read X number of hours a day because I want to go broaden my perspective and understand what's going on out there. So you can start to focus on what you can control, but you must never allow your company, your title to define you. Now, if ideally, whilst you have a job, you ensure it doesn't define you, you're doing all of this anyway. But if you're not, and you're going through change right now, take the time to spend time with yourself, get to know who you are, and go invest in yourself. Because the single biggest bet we can make is on ourselves. And that's why in my book, I write about the concept of the inner genius.
Yes.
I actually do believe, hand to heart, that all of us have an inner genius, not defined by what is our IQ score and stuff like that, but defined by the fact that all of us are talented in our own way. But the ability to extract the talent comes from the ability to have awareness, knowing who we are, what we're good at, what we're not great at, and then getting behind ourselves. And if you can turn around and tap into that, the better version of yourself can evolve over time and compound beautifully. So the sooner you do it, the better your compounding average is.
Yeah.
So that's why sometimes I wish I knew what I know now. I wish I knew when I was in my 20s. Because if I knew that, I'd be in a different space. I love the space I'm in right now, but I would have been in an even better space, right? Where I'm at right now. So whatever we're going through right now is going to be the norm. Now the question is, what do we want to do about it? You can sit down, stay in your comfort zone, and say, hey, why fix something that's not broken? Great. Or you can turn around and make a choice and say, I want to do something about it on my terms so I can thrive versus waiting for it to happen to me and then I hope I survive. The choice ultimately is ours.
Yeah, I love that. What we're going to do about this conversation is put an end to it, unfortunately. I've had a lot of fun talking to you.
Likewise, Imad.
Thanks for making the time. Really appreciate your insights, your time. I know you're busy, you travel a lot.
No, not at all. Thanks for having me.
It's harder to book an appointment with you than it is with the Prime Minister.
No, don't say that.
but that just goes to show how important a figure you are in other people's lives as well. So.
No, I'm fortunate and I appreciate the kind words, but more than anything else, thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to the next one.
You're welcome. Hopefully see you around soon.
You definitely will. Yeah. Take care, Matt.